I feel better now.
Scooch a little bit.
No? Okay.
Is that okay?
I've got one for Neisha.
Everything you own in the box to the left.
Okay, ready? Neisha, can you talk more on a ketogenic lifestyle for older adults? There's many people suffering from dementia. They will benefit from presence of ketones.
I think depending on the mental health of the person who's, over 75, if they are predestined to Alzheimer's, dementia, they're already showing signs, and ketones absolutely could help. High fat is also going to help because the body will produce more ketones, and the cleaner their health, the better. I think also Keto Chow comes into play at this point too. Sponsors. With some coconut oil to also boost the ketone production. Like I said, the nursing home patients are given Ensure. If we were to go in and just replace the Ensure with Keto Chow, how much better would the cognitive function of these clients be? Right, so if your grandma, your sister, your brother is to the point where they're like, I'm not going to eat keto, but you're like, here, have this shake, that's a great way to sneak something in there that is still going to help them. Yeah.
Yeah, they also wanted to know what about MCTs, esters, and protein shakes. I think you just.
Yeah, basically you just would add those to the Keto Chow too. Yeah.
So this question is for Robert. What is your opinion on the concept of body recomposition? That is losing body fat at the same time as gaining muscle.
Yeah, so you can do both simultaneously, but you're not going to optimize for either if you're trying to do both at the same time. So I'm a big fan of prioritizing one, maximizing the potential with that one, and then shifting to the other once that goal has been reached for that initial, whether it is to build muscle or lose body fat. That's why I transitioned from a building phase to a cutting phase after enough time is allotted. If you just try to do both at the same time, you're going to be kind of in this purgatory limbo state where you're not really maximizing for either.
Hey, Robert, I have a follow-up. So because in somebody who is obese and untrained, would that individual be in a better position than a lean individual who has been training for a long time to experience some recomp? That is a what is that? What's that question called? A leading question.
I'd love to answer that, and the answer is absolutely yes. And I have a masterclass all on recomp because this is my specialty, and this is where I live most of the time for myself and my clients. So I was actually about to say that untrained individuals and those with a lot of body fat to lose and or under-muscled currently. So you can be skinny fat and still get major benefits from recomp without having to stuff yourself to try to gain. I kind of like to call it gaintaining, basically maintaining, but you're seeing the recomp. You're just not going to see it on the scale. So just like I talked about tracking the right things, you're not going to see it on the scale if you're doing recomp correctly, because muscle building takes a lot longer than fat loss in terms of the rate.
Yeah, just kind of follow up with what Kim was asking there. You have muscle maturity. Most people have heard of that. For me, having trained pretty extensively for the past 14 years, any incremental gain that I see in lean mass year after year after year is great. But when I first started working out, my first 6 months to a year, that's when I saw the most progress in a finite period of time. The same is going to be true for y'all if you have never really trained in the past. You're going to be subjecting your body to a new stimulus. Your body's going to respond very aggressively to that new stimulus. And then as you continue to do that, it becomes more incremental over time. So for someone that is overweight and untrained, yes, you're going to see a much more obvious and vast improvement in a shorter period of time doing both than you would if you were to have been training for years and have much more incremental progress over time.
Don't wait to start lifting.
Okay, the next one is for Autumn. My wife went from about 240 pounds to 132 pounds. Wow. She has gone back up to 153 pounds, and she hasn't changed anything. I think she's looking amazing, but she still hates herself in the mirror. What can I do to help her? And also, P.S., What's Richard's go-to karaoke song? I will answer that one. If you want to know what Richard's go-to karaoke song is, you have to come to Keto Palooza.
He will not be singing it, and it is Summer of 69. Literally, the words Summer of 69 are the only words he knows to the song. But the rest of it, pure entertainment. You know, I can relate so deeply to that because as people that yo-yo, once you hit a low weight, that is the be-all, end-all, only measure of success you will ever accept again. And until I get back to that lowest number I've ever seen, nothing else matters, right? It doesn't matter that I'm looking better. It doesn't matter that I feel better about the amount of food I get to eat and about the activities I get to do in my life. It doesn't matter if my husband even thinks I look good. If the number is not the low number I've seen, I must be failing, right? And honestly, I can't convince you that your current weight is okay, right? It has to come from what you're thinking. Why do you think that you are better at this lower number? Literally, why? What could you do then that you cannot do right now? And if the only answer is fit in smaller clothes, that's on you to reconcile, right? But can you walk any further less? Can you fit in airplane seats worse? Can you not do the things you want to do? And if you can't do those things, it's much less to do with that number than any sort of activity or strength or other change you could do. But I know the pain of just chasing that low number and not feeling like you're done or that you can rest or that you're as good as you once were until you see that number. All I can say is just think to yourself, why am I obsessed with this? And if it's a good why, then keep taking action to get to that. You know, I love what Kim said. Don't get angry with yourself that you're not willing to do what it takes to get to a certain spot. If you're just not willing to do that, then accept yourself where you are and don't think you're a failure because you haven't seen that low number. Because if you're being honest, you probably were not your happiest at that low number. You thought that low number was going to do it. It probably didn't. And so that's why you even got back up to begin with, right? Because that low number wasn't worth staying there. Doing what you had to do wasn't worth it, right? And I've been there. It's not worth the squeeze. Exactly. The juice was not worth the squeeze. The suffering was not worth seeing that low number. To still have the flabby arms, to still have the the sagging thighs, it wasn't worth it. So I can't convince you that you're beautiful. I can't convince you that you're at a good weight, but I would just encourage you to try to figure out, why am I obsessed with this number? Why do I think that the lower number means success, whereas like my happy life doesn't mean success, right? And so I would urge you to think about that.
Also, the 240-pound you would like to slap you silly.
Exactly.
That is accurate. Yeah. This one's for Neisha. I'm planning to go all in with you in August. I want to go all the way down to beef, butter, salt, and water, starting from meat-heavy keto, including coffee, sweeteners, cream cheese, Primal Kitchen mayonnaise, olives, mushrooms, and berries. I want to scale down slowly through June and July to minimize discomfort, especially on coffees and sweeteners. Do you have any opinion on what to cut down on first? What is least likely to be causing inflammation, and should I keep in sardines and cod liver until August?
That is a lot. You're right. I would say if you're enjoying those meats, there's no reason to cut those out until you get to August. And you still, when you get to August, don't have to cut those out because that's still carnivore. I always say wean down the dairy because that's what people love the most. So if you're using a little cream in your coffee, cut that in half. And then cut that in half until you get to August. Same with everything else, like the sweeteners. Cut that in half for a month. Then cut that in half for a month till you get to August. So by the time you get to August, it's not this huge drastic that I'm just giving up all the things that I love. You've already began that process ahead of time. So by the time you get to August, you're basically there. It's just a teeny tiny step over that line to get to triple B&E or ruminant and salt and all that stuff. So that's where I would go with that. And just be aware when you start cutting down the dairy, sometimes that can be hard. And you may have some issues with cutting down the dairy because it is a addictive thing. But that doesn't mean it's bad to give it up. It just means it's a process to give it up.
I will say I am more addicted to cheese than sugar. Okay. What was that? Well, I may or may not have eaten 10 pounds of Swiss cheese over the last 5 days. Okay, Natalie. What works for wrinkling flabby skin?
Muscle. Seriously, I get this question all the time. Clients want to know what they can do to get rid of the skin. The topical things, it's all anecdotal. There's no factual thing that's going to the fascia blaster and the creams and all of that. Build muscle underneath, and the skin tightens up around it. You would be surprised how many of my colleagues on stage were 200 pounds plus before they got on stage, and they made a transformation. You cannot see anything in those bikinis on stage. It looks like they never had children. It looks like they were never that weight. So truly changing the shape of your body. And I wanted to actually speak to this on the question about the weight, going down, coming back up, and still hating your body. A lot of that, yes, is psychological. But also there's a size of your body and there is a shape of your body. And if you're just managing all of this only with diet and you have not done anything to change the shape of your body, to change the performance and the fitness level of your body, doing that will not only improve the way that your body looks realistically in the mirror. Of course, we're still going to have to deal with the body dysmorphia, but the pride that you have in yourself for what you're capable of, the strength, the ability of your body will work on that psychological piece too. So build muscle. That's the answer.
Okay, so we did have a question asking about whether or not it would be appropriate to utilize a shake like Keto Chow for older people, but I believe we've already covered that question.
I can tell you guys that my mother's doctor, my mother is 84 years old. He wanted her to put her on Ensure. And my mother's like, oh, they're drinking me Ensure. I'm like, what? You were an oncologist. And so she now drinks Keto Chow, and she said she feels better on it.
We have also kind of done, because we're from South Florida and there are a lot of assisted living communities, and we have almost gone door to door to a lot of places trying to see if we could help in that area, suggesting it. And staff being willing to mix it is the biggest obstacle that we found.
Right.
But we have talked to some families, if they're willing to come in as a representative at mealtime and mix it for them, they would be willing to serve it instead of Ensure.
Yes. So if you have a loved one in a long-term care facility, you can mix it as long as it is labeled correctly in the refrigerator and the nurse is not, lazy. Because there's bad nurses, there's bad doctors, there's great nurses, there's great doctors, and it just depends on where you are and what shift, honestly. But if they are willing to pour that cup, it's not that hard. Mm-hmm. It's okay to take it in there. It just has to be labeled correctly, the date, the time, and what is in it and who it belongs to.
Right.
Yes, but there are guidelines that some facilities will be like, it can only be in the refrigerator for 3 days. But just ask and they will let you know that. I know, Chris. I know.
So this is to the entire panel. What is the best method to reduce insulin resistance?
Who wants to start? All right. So I think there's the quickest thing to do, which we all probably know, is if you cut carbs, that's very helpful, because insulin resistance is you're swimming in that sea of insulin at all times. You have very high insulin all the time. Just like when you play the radio too loud for too long, how do you fix your temporary deafness? You got to turn the radio down. So turning down the foods that will raise your insulin is the first and most rapid step. From there are more things you can do. Specifically, gaining muscle mass is one of the best things you can do, because your muscles are a sink for glucose in your body. It's actually using your muscles is the really only way to dispose of glucose without secreting insulin. And so using your muscles and eating lower carb, those are my two. Who wants to take it from there?
What she said.
Insulin resistance is kind of complicated, and I'm assuming that when people ask about insulin resistance, they're talking about having too high insulin that might have gone into creating an insulin resistant state. And they're talking about insulin resistance in the liver specifically, because that's where it's going to have the consequences of high blood sugar. And so a lot of people, when they're asking about insulin resistance, are actually asking about reducing blood sugar levels. Some people, especially if you have a history of type 2 diabetes, you're just going to have a much harder time reducing your blood sugar than someone who didn't have that history. And even if you don't want to reduce protein further than you did, sometimes it can be helpful to break up your protein into smaller meals throughout the day, so that you're not getting an overwhelming insulin response to the protein. I'm assuming everybody's already in the context of a low carbohydrate diet. So that is one thing that some people have found helpful when they're really stuck. They're doing everything sort of right from a ketogenic diet point of view, and they don't want to take their protein any lower because they want to make sure that they're getting enough, is to make it in smaller meals throughout the day.
I feel like the same way. When people say insulin resistance, they're more concerned with the hyperinsulinemia. And a lot of people in this room heard this and they were like, what did you just say? When in doubt, eat fatty meat. That's going to help, right? When in doubt and you're going to eat a carb, it needs to be a real food carb, like some form of low carb vegetable. Your electrolytes need to be in check, whether you need more salt or you don't need that much. And you need to move. And this all just comes back to, what did we used to do? Right? And that is going to keep you in a place where insulin is stable. Anytime you eat, your insulin will go up a little bit, right? That's normal. What you don't want is the big, huge spike and the big, huge dip. And that usually only happens with the crap, right? And it's more manageable when you are moving, right? So don't overcomplicate it. Just make sure you're doing the things that you know are right. Eat real food. Eat plenty of fatty meat. Get off your butt. Do more than you were. Doesn't mean you have to go in the gym immediately and lift like these awesome people, okay? Even just jumping on a trampoline is going to help manage your blood sugars.
Yeah, I pretty much echo all of that as well. The only thing I would add is, like Amber was saying about breaking your protein into smaller meals, make sure you're having fat with the protein. You wouldn't want to have an incredibly high source of protein, like a whey protein isolate, in the absence of dietary fat, because the fat is going to help slow the absorption and improve the absorption of that protein.
Okay, Robert. I've never done bodybuilding. What are the 3 things that I should do first to stop sarcopenia?
All right, so when it comes to preventing sarcopenia, building muscle, there's pretty much just like 4, just muscle wasting more so than anything. There's basically 4 bullet points you got to do. You got to eat enough protein. You got to eat enough total calories or fuel to provide a surplus to build more tissue. You have to subject your body to enough of a training stimulus so that there's a demand for adding more lean tissue, and you have to give yourself ample recovery time. If you do those 4 things, notice I did not say you have to have carbs. That was not one of those bullet points. If you do those 4 things, then you're golden.
So you don't need carbs to build muscle?
No.
Have you seen this guy?
What is your opinion on marinades and tenderizers to flavor beef and protein, specifically things like lime, pineapple juice, ginger, garlic, or yogurt?
I am not a chef.
So maybe unpopular opinion, but we're not morbidly obese because we soak our chicken in yogurt, and so earlier in my journey, I might have been a lot more strict. And also, if I'm doing a strict diet for a specific reason, such as an elimination diet, I follow the rules of that specific protocol. But for everyday life, when you're thinking, how am I going to eat in a way where I can actually live every day? I don't see a problem with using those ingredients. But once again, everyone's nutrition is specialized. Everyone's tastes are different. But I used to be the super vigilant, super like, oh no, our cheese is coated in sawdust, and there's a place for that. Like, don't get me wrong. But when you really have to think about how do you want to live every day and what do you want to focus on every day, I personally don't see an issue with those things as long as you know they don't affect you negatively.
100% agree with that. Also, most of you are not doing that every single day, too. Like, it's like, Sunday, I would like to do a Chipotle chicken, If you're doing it every single day in pineapple juice, that could just be you relying on that sugar, So just also be honest with yourself. Am I using the pineapple juice to feed that monkey that's still on my back? Or is this just how I sustain this lifestyle? I want to have a little bit of flavor on, Thursday or whatever. It's about how you're using these things, not that these things are bad. And if you've done the elimination diet and you know that you can have different kinds of marinades and they don't cause a problem with you, then yeah, this is sustainability. That's the end game here. I can sustain this way of eating and live the best life, feel my best, move, all that good stuff. Yeah.
And I think an important question to always ask yourself is, why do I have this question? Right? It's the same thing. People will be like, what breaks a fast? And you're like, oi. It kind of depends what you're fasting for. And if the question is, can I include this food? Well, what about that food makes you think you shouldn't include it? Have you done an elimination diet and you know you're sensitive to that food? If you know you're not sensitive to that food and you're just like, I'm going to not be able to lose any weight because I put garlic on something, then that is what I would call anxiety-based thinking. And it's probably your anxiety about using some garlic is probably holding you back much worse than using garlic.
I'm a hedonist. I think that we should do things that maximize pleasure. So really, and so the taste is about short-term pleasure, and the other reasons that we eat are for a slightly longer-term pleasure of how we feel in our bodies. And when we're lucky, those things don't conflict. And if they're not conflicting, then you should go for the taste that maximizes your pleasure. And only if that is causing you some kind of reduction in the pleasure of your health should you then say, well, I have a conflict and a choice to make, and either choice is okay. It's up to you. So you can either say, I'm going to add this marinade and I'm not going to feel as good for a couple days, and that's okay because it was worth it to me. Or you can say, I would rather feel better tomorrow, and that's up to you.
God, I love this panel.
It's funny because we have a saying like 90% is good enough. Strive for perfection. Know you're never, ever going to achieve perfection, but do your best. So like at home, we don't use flour and sauces or any of that kind of stuff. We're on a cruise. If the worst thing that I had was butter chicken that probably had cornstarch in the sauce, I'm okay with that because I'm not going to do it when I get home.
Well, I don't think anybody on this panel is going to let you cry in your pineapple chicken should you enjoy a pineapple chicken. If you make that pineapple chicken, you enjoy that pineapple chicken.
Yep. I've got one for Neisha. This is a good one. And this next one I think Rachel wrote. But Neisha, what is the process to reintroduce combinations of foods after you've done single ones, like cheese and dairy or something like that?
So you should just do one form of dairy. So one specific type of cheese. I would start with aged cheeses, and I'll walk you through this in the group because it is a little complex. So Parmesan is a hard aged cheese. I would start there and work your way down to the soft cheeses if you like those. If you don't like those, there's no reason to reintroduce them. Don't reintroduce Velveeta, right? Okay, and then you move down to liquid dairy. If you enjoy heavy cream, you can reintroduce heavy cream into your coffee. See how that affects you. For me, I had to give up heavy cream every single day because it caused me to have hormonal cystic acne, and that's not a good look, and I don't like it. So just work through the dairy. Have some What is it you say, Dr. Berry? He's not listening to me. What's new? Vitamin P. Patience.
Yeah.
It will be worth it because if you do not have vitamin P, then you're going to skew your results. You have to look at this as a scientific experiment or you're going to skew your results. You would never throw something into a petri dish that didn't belong in that scientific study. You can't put multiple things in there. It's going to mess up the result. Patience. Aged cheeses first, then soft cheeses, then liquid dairy, and then nuts should really be... Look, y'all, we never ate nuts by the bagful before, and we sure as crap didn't grind them down to powder, and we didn't drink oat milk. You know, those things you shouldn't reintroduce. They're just not real food. Okay? So just keep that in mind.
This question is for Natalie. What is your recommendation to set initial protein macros? For example, a female who is 54 years old.
Okay, I would definitely need a lot more context to answer this question, but I would say no human being should be eating less than 100 grams of protein. I have weighed less than 100 pounds in my life. I should not have ever been eating under 100 grams of protein. Per day, right, in a 24-hour span. So if you're not, okay, I'm going to give you my formula, my rule of thumb, and anybody can use this. First thing you want to do is look at, okay, what's my current weight? What's my ideal body weight? So this might be your goal weight that you have in mind, or even better, if you look at the little tables that are not great, but there's somewhere to look at for your height and your weight. And it says, okay, this is the range of ideal weight for you. Hopefully your goal weight falls within there somewhere. I look at that. So there's 3 numbers. There's your current weight, your goal weight, and your current lean body mass. The way you figure out your current lean body mass, you have to know your body fat percentage. From your body fat percentage, you can figure out your body fat mass. So your body fat percentage times your current body weight is your body fat mass. You subtract your body fat mass from your total current body weight, and that's where you get your lean body mass. It's basically everything that's not the fat on your body. That lean body mass, if you're not yet eating 1 gram per pound of your current lean body mass, that should be your first goal. So let me give it to you in numbers. If I was 100 pounds, I'm only using this because it's round number, but if I was 100 pounds and I was 20% body fat, that means I have 20 pounds of body fat on my body. That means I have 80 pounds of lean body mass on my body. That means if I'm currently eating 60 grams of protein and my lean body mass is 80, my first goal is getting to 80. Once I can do that comfortably, meaning I'm not stuffing myself and I'm not terribly uncomfortable doing that, now I want to move up to what's my goal weight. If you're 100 pounds, hopefully your goal weight is higher than 100 pounds for an adult. Let's say it's 120. If your goal weight is 120, work up to that. At that point in time, hopefully you're strength training. So for my ladies who I start with, who are typically eating very little protein, we work up to that lean body mass number. We work up to their ideal body weight. Many times they get there and we keep increasing the protein as we continue to build body muscle. So you can go above that. I currently am eating above my body weight in protein. I eat about 1.25, 1.3, all the way up to 1.5 times my body weight in protein to maintain and to build muscle.
Do you have anything to add, Robert? Just because you had said earlier that that's kind of in your, like, a lot of the people you coach.
Yeah, like a good general rule of thumb is 1 gram of protein per pound of lean mass. That's a super safe starting point for most people. When I'm in a competition prep or I'm working with clients that are in competition prep, I'm manipulating macros to achieve a very specific look for a very finite period of time. So I'll manipulate those numbers from there quite a bit. But a good general rule of thumb is 1 gram of protein per pound of lean mass as a minimum, for sure.
For those of you who have a hard time getting that much protein in, because protein is full, especially I know we have female subscribers, I'll give you a little hint, shameless plug for one of our videos. And since they're not a sponsor, I can actually say this. You have products like Carnivore Crisps and Carnivore Snacks, which are super expensive, right? Like $40 for 3 ounces. That is basically super thin. It's like meat in a potato chip form, right? We have a video that shows you how to make your own for like, instead of $40 for 3 ounces, you could pay $5 for 3 ounces. If you eat 5 ounces of that, which pretty much everybody here can do, you're eating a pound of meat in protein. Like, so that's a lot of proteins, and it's easy. It's not going to fill you up because you're eating a pound of meat, but it's very thin because you've removed all of the water. And it's very easy to do. Slice it thin, throw it in a dehydrator for 4.5 hours. Okay, Robert, how much time and work do you put in the gym during a cut? And is progressive overload even a thing then?
Yeah, so personally, I'm training 5 days a week. I'm typically training for about an hour a day, and I don't really do any cardio in the building phase. I only pretty much incorporate cardio in the cutting phase. So I'm prioritizing the resistance training. So I don't recommend everybody goes from 0 to 100 overnight. Like, if you're not doing any weight training right now, there's no need for you to go to 5 days of an hour each day. Like, just simply start with a very simple, push-pull leg routine or something of that nature, something that you can incrementally increase over time. Again, progressive overload is just simply a little better today than you were yesterday. So it didn't have to be 5 days a week of an hour each time. But that's what I'm personally doing. For the past 6 months, I've been doing a full body routine, which I've always kind of talked down about, but I've honestly really enjoyed it. So I'm currently doing a full body routine. So I pick one exercise for each body part, and I do 4 to 5 sets for that exercise, and each day I change the exercise for that given body part, and that's worked pretty well for me thus far.
And if you're not already following him on Instagram, do that, because you're giving updates like week after week about like what you're doing, and it's really interesting whether that's something that you're doing or not, just to see how you're moving the numbers and changing things.
Yeah, I'm being completely transparent with this competition prep, because there's a lot of dogma in the bodybuilding space. Like, people don't believe that you can lose body fat and maintain muscle with a high fat, moderate protein, low carbohydrate, ketogenic diet, but you absolutely can, and I think it's certainly optimal over what I was doing previously with a high carb approach. So yeah, I'm showing every single week what my macros are, what my training's been like, what my sleep quality's like, what my libido's like all these things that people are scared to talk about. I'm putting it all out there.
I just wanted to add that, ladies, it's no different for you. So don't think that this is just for men. Women need to train the same way. We always say we're not small men, but when it comes to weight training and building muscle, it's the same process. It's the same thing. Progressive overload, same concepts apply for women. Don't think we need to be doing something different.
On that note, all these women that think that you have to build a big booty with some kind of weird finagled, buy it on Amazon, as seen on TV, banded exercise thing, just do some heavy-ass squats, y'all.
Is there any connection between diet and ovarian cysts and uterine problems?
Well, I mean, PCOS is basically a form of insulin resistance. So if you have cysts, PCOS, but I also personally have had an ovarian cyst, not related to PCOS, and the discussions that I've had around them, it does seem like they have an insulin component, because in talking with my doctor, she's like, oh, you've had this for a really long time, and there aren't new ones, right? So I think that there definitely is, but probably a doctor could give more on this, or a nurse.
Do you think it is bad to eat this way for your uterus or ovarian cysts?
Did I answer the opposite question?
No. The question was, is it related? Even if it wasn't, or, there's nothing bad that could come of eating a low inflammatory way of eating, as far as specifically cysts or the uterus, but overall women's hormones, it seems, do better on a animal fat, meat-based way of eating. There's not a lot of studies probably that are like, evidence-based review, blah, 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 but common sense should tell you we came from meat-based, low-inflammatory foods. We're still here. We're still present, and and I got pregnant because I was eating a lot of meat, a lot of animal fat, and very, very low inflammatory vegetables for me. So I can tell you for me personally, it seemed that I did better, and I've had cysts in the past, and since I've been eating this way, I've had none. Does that mean you will never ever get a uterine cyst again? No, it's not a miracle, but you're not going to add to the risk, probably.
Yeah, and I would also say, like, the number of health things that we could test a diet against are too many. But I think every one of us has experienced improved health in ways that we never would have thought would be related to the diet, and almost certainly are. So the chances that any given thing that you name could have a relation to diet, I think is quite plausible, even if we don't, and maybe we'll never have the direct evidence of it.
The other thing, so a lot of those cysts have to do with hormonal issues, right? Like, you tend not to get ovarian cysts, or at least they tend to be shrunk down after menopause, right? So I would imagine there's probably a strong link with estrogen dominance and the prevalence of cysts. So
this question is for Kim Howerton. Will you please speak to keto and mental health? I've been diagnosed with fibromyalgia. All labs were okay, even according to your lab book. I've been using keto and a small amount of MCT daily, but I continue to struggle with periods of confusion and memory loss. Do you have any other tips?
So general mental clarity or mental health?
This is a struggle with periods of confusion
and memory loss. Well, definitely, when we're suffering from any type of, there are basically two things that I will say. One is, if you're suffering from any type of cognitive issue, eating a low inflammatory diet is going to be the number one thing you want to do to prevent more harm. But the second one is, there is good evidence that if people have impaired brain function, right, like in the case of Alzheimer's as an example, often when we have long periods of insulin resistance, we can become insulin resistant in the brain. We can just become much less adept inside of our brain at using glucose as energy. And when that happens, using ketones as energy can provide an alternate fuel source that can help a lot of people experience more mental clarity. In the case specifically of fibromyalgia, I'm not entirely sure, but certainly as it's an inflammatory condition or related to, that is probably part of it. But I think it's like a 1-2. In terms of like general mental health, I will also speak to this, and certainly Amber can, I think, is I'm somebody who has had a lifetime of mental health issues. I was first diagnosed with depression when I was 9 years old. And keto was the thing that really altered the trajectory of my ability to be a functional human. And so it's also what I talked about, that 1-2 punch of a low inflammatory state and potentially being able to have ketones in your brain supplementally, whether you are supplementing them or just you're supplementing them from here, then it can be very helpful.
Is the person in here who asked that question? No? Okay.
I just wanted to say one thing. Just as somebody who's been on my own mental health journey, I believe that I've also been healing from the medication used to treat my mental health. So, you'll watch a commercial, and I mean, we joke about all the side effects that go with the medication. Well, after more than 25 years on so many medications with their own varying side effects, I think that is, it's been a slow progress.
I would add, ketone bodies are uniquely good for the brain, and animal fat is good for the brain. In addition to that, and this is circuitous and might not apply to the person who asked the question, but when we're talking about cognitive function, and mood is a cognitive function, sleep is really important. Yes. And one thing that you need for good sleep is to eat enough. A lot of people don't realize this connection, but if you're not eating enough, you will not sleep well enough. So that could be something else to look into.
I'm so glad you said that. I was thinking this person, maybe if they're doing fasting or they're doing OMAD, they may not be getting what their body needs, and that's going to impair your cognitive abilities. And also electrolytes. If you're not dialed in on electrolytes, that could be an issue as well.
just in case anyone in here also has fibromyalgia, if you have had that diagnosis but you haven't had a full thyroid panel done, please have that done. Because very often women walk into a rheumatology clinic, I'm in pain, I feel awful, and the doctor will just give them the diagnosis of fibromyalgia. I worked in a rheumatology clinic where this happened all the time. So if they did not run a full thyroid panel, it could be also that your thyroid is functioning low. You may also have an autoimmune disease. So you really need all the information. So just be aware that all of this still applies, but you want all the information too.
Before we closed, we have one more question, but I wanted to say that there was a second half of my presentation in my normal length presentation. I'm going to put that up on YouTube in the next week, and I'll make sure there's a link to it, because I want you guys also to know what I did to then lose another 40 pounds and what my clients do to then fix the thing. And I would just use the term reverse diet as a hint, because I learned that from Robert, and it was the thing that really changed the whole trajectory of my life. So just wanted to put that out there.
I think reverse diet changed most of our lives,
Yeah.
right? Thanks, Robert, for bringing that up a lot. I don't even know if I want to read this one. I think Rachel probably wrote it, but I'm gonna read it. Can Dr. Berry take his shirt off?
I did not write it.
He laughed. So
Okay. So no is
no.
the answer to that.
I guess the answer is he can. He is able to do so.
now I do
So we
want to
answered the
Neisha.
question.
That is farm strong there, right?
Yeah, he does nothing except he throws trees.
Farm strong. So you don't need a gym. You just need a farm.
There he is, Dr. Berry. I can just tell you, he looks even better with it off. Okay, there you go.
There we go. Hey, before we close out, I do want to say, you talk about mental health and keto. That woman over there, when we started our YouTube channel, would vomit in the bathroom for an hour for the thought of turning on a camera. Okay? She attempted suicide twice. And when we got married, she said, I'm going to be on medication for the rest of my life. I just want you to know. And when I lose my mom, you're probably going to have to put me into a home. She's on no medication. She gets up here. And that is all only because of keto. Because the only thing that has changed in her life is her diet. And if you want to learn more about that, I'm going to tell you, go read Dr. Palmer's book.
Brain energy.
Okay. Guys, can we give it up for all of today's speakers and all the speakers that we had?